My name is Dave Zwang. I am the chairman of the Ghent Workgroup, amongst other things. In this webinar, what I want to do is I want to give you kind of an overview of what the Ghent Workgroup is, what we do, some of the things that we are doing to help you in your businesses, in your field, and what you can do if you want to get involved and work with us. There will be time for questions. Can't ask any questions during the presentation, but if you put questions in the question section, I will try to answer those when we get to the end of the presentation. So with that, let me get started. As I said, there's a number of webinars that we'll be doing. This is the first in the series, and you'll see there's reasons to Preflight, PDF standards, and PDF 2.0 is a big one, by the way. For those of you who are interested, PDF 2.0 will be coming soon to a theater, and more importantly, to applications near you. While it affects a lot of different areas in terms of PDF usage, it's important and it's something that you should probably be aware of. We did a survey on PDF and PDF usage globally. We had over 1,000 respondents, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but there's a great webinar that's coming up on that. In addition, there's a webinar on PDF and PDFX Plus, and what does that even mean, and how it can help you kind of better enforce what your clients are giving you, but more importantly, help you meet their expectations. There's a seminar specifically on the output suite, which is a way to test your workflows. Something on processing steps, which really goes into how to use layers, if you will, or more in a more technical way, the structure within PDF to actually help go beyond just processing. And then there'll be something on PDF and packaging, which is more of a discussion about futures, but the future is actually not that far off. And as I said, even during this webinar, I'll talk through some of that. So first of all, who's the GWG? Who is the Ghent Workgroup? We're basically an international organization. We're made up of graphic arts users, graphic arts associations, and developers. In other words, pretty much everybody within the vertical market of graphic arts, publishing, print, and packaging. The people who actually are hands-on in the Ghent Workgroup are people who are donating their time because it's a volunteer organization, but they're donating their time, and these are some of the best minds in the industry globally. While I'm not going to go over and start naming people, if you saw them and if you read anything about what we do and look on our website, you'll be able to get a better feel for that. So our members include educators. We have a number of universities that are involved with us. We have, as I said, graphic arts users. These are companies like pre-press companies, printing companies, publishers, packaging companies, associations, various associations, the FTA, the Global Association. I'm not going to go through the whole list. And software and hardware vendors, people who actually manufacture and develop a lot of the software that you use every day, or your people use every day, or you, perhaps if you're a vendor, what you sell every day. These are more of a graphic representation of our various members. And you can see these are logos that you're probably very familiar with. You know, as we'll talk at the end, if you want to be part of this organization, you can, and we'll tell you how you can join and be part of what we do. These are the subcommittees that actually do the work. The way the Ghent Workgroup is structured is we actually have this overriding organization, the Ghent Workgroup, and in each in the Ghent Workgroup we have different subcommittees that are dedicated to working on very specific areas. And as you can see, these are areas that are fairly important to, again, to what you're doing and what we as an industry need to do and need to structure. As you can see, there's variable data and color management, cross-media, documentation, which is very important, and we'll go through some of that later, but documentation, we actually write a lot of white papers and publish a lot of white papers and instructional documents that you can actually use. Marketing, of course, to help us get the word out, office document printing, packaging, process control, and specifications. And specifications is actually where we started back in 2002. We're actually 15 years old now. Our mission is to develop and maintain best process specifications for basically to create best practices in graphic arts workflows. You know, what's interesting is I've been in this industry a long time, and I travel all over the world, and I work with a lot of people who are on the front line, both developers as well as end users, people who actually are sitting in front of the computer trying to make the files work, or get the press running and make sure that they're delivering what the client is asking for. And a lot of these people, and perhaps even some of you who are listening, pretty much didn't get any formal training. You were trained by the people above you, or the people who you know, were your subordinates. And as time went on, we realized that there's really a need to create structure and best practices for people. And when I talk about structure and best practices, I'm also talking somewhat about standards, because I think standards are very important, and they're an important part of what we do. We actually collaborate with a lot of standards organizations. As a matter of fact, some of the stuff we actually do and create in the Ghent Workgroup winds up going into the standards organizations for more codification, if you will. And we work with ISO, and a lot of the people who sit on the Ghent Workgroup are actually part of ISO, representing different members in different organizations and countries around the globe. And basically, it's about helping our partners and our members be successful. So we introduce practical workflow tools, streamline production tasks, give you technical background, as I said, create specifications, best practices, and industry solutions. So why is that important? There was a study that was recently done, actually by ID Alliance, who is one of the organizations we work with. We're kind of like partners in many things. And they were looking at the primary objectives of capital investment of graphic arts providers, service providers. And this is what these graphic art service providers said where they're going to be putting their money over the next 3 years. More efficient workflows, increased automation to reduce labor costs, faster turnaround times and make-readies, increasing and upgrading capacity to support expected growth, which is great for the industry, and basically to serve the markets more profitably, and also diversification, because one of the things that we're finding throughout the industry is it used to be that people had a very narrow niche or market that they served, but now they're getting involved in a lot of other things, and some of that has to do with different technologies, omni-channel marketing, that involves lots of different types of applications and skill sets. So a lot of this is what we have actually been focusing on building toward over the time that we've been involved. And it really kind of centers around this diagram, if you will. This is a diagram based on a study that was done for Premier, which is a graphic arts, an international graphic arts vendors association, a developers association. And what they did is, and I was actually involved in this study, what we did is we tried to create a map or a view of where the future would be and where we would need to be as an industry to be able to take advantage of all of the changes that are going on in the marketplace, the changes introduced by technology, the changes introduced by changes in the market and market dynamics, etc. And as I said, a lot of what we've been developing at the Ghent Workgroup really tends to fit within this mapping here. and in various spaces. But ultimately what it does is it allows us, as we're doing this development, we look at this and we look at how we can continue to develop with this in mind, so that it's not a one-off and it doesn't put anybody who's making an investment, whether it's an investment in developing software or it's an investment in buying or licensing software or introducing new workflows. So it doesn't put them in a corner as things change. It allows them to actually continue to develop their business and change as their market changes and technology changes. These are kind of if we were to take a look at the work, the output, if you will, of what the Ghent Workgroup does, it could probably fall into 4 different categories. Specifications, which, as I said, is what we, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, but this is really, specifications are really what the Ghent Workgroup was founded on. Test suites. As we were developing specifications and best practices, we found that, you know what, people really need a way to test their workflows. So we created test suites so you can actually do that. Application settings, you know, the applications are changing. The creative applications are changing. The applications that you're using, if you're doing pre-press work or printing, and in your DFEs are changing. And what we tried to do is we tried to create, along with our vendor members and our vendor partners, application settings that we could give to you, or make available to you, I should say, so that you can actually structure your business settings so that they are kind of the best practice for the application you're using to develop, again, a more seamless and efficient workflow. And then job tickets, and we've actually done a number of different job tickets, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a few minutes. And job tickets really are a way to communicate work. You know, when we look at, well, I'll give you 2 perfect examples. One of the job tickets we created had to do with ad processing. So if you're a publisher and you want to take ads in, well, there's certain information you're going to need, and rather than, depending on who you are, if you're a marketing agency or an ad agency or a pre-press house that's actually preparing ads that need to go into a publication, and these ads, by the way, don't have to be print ads. These can actually be alternate media ads, multimedia ads. There's certain information that these people need, and they were, depending on which publisher you went to, they were asking for different information, and we tried to structure it in such a way and standardize it, and that's was one of the job tickets we did. We did another one for soft proofing, so that as you got a file in, if you were going to soft proof it, there was a way for you to actually know what information is required, and there was a way for developers, more importantly, to develop their applications to both know how to give that and pass that information on, as well as to receive that information. We did as I said, our name is the Ghent PDF Workgroup. We changed it to Ghent Workgroup because we kind of tend to fall in other areas that surround PDF, but our roots, if you will, are still very much in PDF, and we'll explain why in a second. But so what we did is we took this survey, and we held it in April and May of this year. As you can see, we held it in a lot of different languages, and we had over 1,000, actually over 1,100 respondents, and it was very, very telling, and I would very much suggest that if you have an opportunity that you listen to the webinar that we have on this survey, because there's a lot of great insight, both for end users, marketing and advertisers, as well as developers. The last major study on PDF that was done was actually, there was one done in 2005, that was the big one. There was another one done in 2008, but it's been a while, and it's been very interesting to see some of the differences, and they'll go over some of that in that future webinar. Here's just a couple of little samples of some of the information. So we asked, what file types do you receive and produce? And you can see we gave them options: regular PDF, PDFX, PostScript, native files, image files, Office files, and then just kind of other types of files, and it's very interesting. And for those of you who either create and or ingest, if you will, and receive some of these types of files, you know, there are certain benefits, significant benefits, for example, to take PDFX or a PDFX Plus, and I'll talk about what that means shortly too, file over, for example, a PostScript or an EPS file. As a matter of fact, Adobe has been very vocal about and instrumental in actually trying to move people away from PostScript and EPS files, because they do not support a lot of the new graphic models that exist in the applications that they and Quark, etc., produce, and that you use probably on a daily basis. We asked, do you pre-flight? This is a very basic question. 83% said yes, and 17% said no. Well, the 17% are obviously already having issues, or they could be potentially working in a transactional type of environment where they're just getting data dumps out of a computer and it's already fairly structured, so there's no need to pre-flight. Or perhaps it's a constrained development, constrained design coming out of a web-to-print application where there's really very little need to pre-flight because everything is pretty much under control or very tightly controlled. But the 83%, and again, you'll have to come to the webinar to hear about this, but that breakdown is interesting, because what is it, do you pre-flight? Well, if I asked each one of you out there in the audience, do you pre-flight, and then said, okay, what does that mean to you? You know, do you use a pre-flight application? You know, in some cases it's, well, no, I just open it up and look at it. Well, okay, what can you get, what information can you get from looking at it versus actually going and digging and finding out whether that information actually is going to support the requirements of the process? Because that's really what pre-flight is. Pre-flight is really nothing more than a way to evaluate the incoming raw materials, if you will, against the requirements of a process further downstream. So this is, you know, as you start digging into this, you can see, and I recently gave a presentation, this presentation at Print 17 in Chicago, and I can't tell you how many people were fascinated and said, listen, you know, you need to get this out there to more people, because I'm trying to explain to my boss or my controller that I need to get some pre-flight software because it's going to save us money. And the reality is that, yeah, it will. Obviously, you have to know how to use it, but of course it will. You know, the cost of pre-flight software is the cost of one bad job. So in any case, you should really attend this seminar. I think it's going to be a webinar. It's going to be very important. You know, how many files contain errors? Well, and this is kind of interesting, and they'll go over this in terms of comparison against 2005. But if you look at this, you know, about almost half are saying, well, few files, maybe between 0 and 10%. But if you're looking at it, the other almost half are saying, yeah, well, a lot of them do contain errors, you know, more than 50% or about, you know, half, 25%. That's a lot of files containing errors. That's a lot of handwork. That's a lot of potential wasted expense and cost. So very important. So why is PDFX so important? And why do I harp on it? Well, first of all, PDF is important for a lot of reasons. PDF is a very important format because it's really like a container. It can contain not just the graphic elements. It can contain the fonts. I mean, it can contain movies. It contains sound. It can contain a lot of, obviously you're not going to print movies or sound, but depending on what you're going to be doing with it, those can be very important. And that format, PDF in itself, can actually contain some of that. PDFX tends to constrain even further what PDF would allow, and we'll talk about that in a second too. But it's object-oriented, which means that if you need to edit it, interestingly enough, you can edit it at an object level. You can edit a font, you can edit a character, you can edit an image. It's relatively easy to work with. It's somewhat ubiquitous. People are using it in all kinds of fields and in different types of applications. So it's out there. It maintains a division of responsibility. So unlike an application file, where somebody gives you an application file to process or to review, where you could actually, like the proverbial cat on the keyboard, hit a button and actually wind up changing the file. It's going to be a lot more difficult to do that with a PDF. Not impossible, because the tools exist, but it will be a lot more difficult. So it maintains a division of responsibility. And more importantly, or probably as important, is that there's a process support ecosystem that's been developing since the introduction of PDF in the early 1980s, that actually helps create the tools and the systems and processes that allow you to do your work every day. So PDFX, what is PDFX? What does that even mean? So this is a basic structure of kind of PDF. And at the lower level, you can see this is the PDF, which is now a standard, and it's an ISO standard. The ISO group is the 32000 group. This is the PDF that has everything in it. That allows you to, it has a structure, it's a standardized structure, but it can put movies, and it can put different types of scripts and things that allow things to happen if you click on it or open it. Now, obviously, if you're going to be printing it, or you want some form of reliability, if you're going to be printing it, you want something that's a little bit tighter, that doesn't allow movies, that enforces the fact that a font has to be in the file, because otherwise you have all these licensing issues you have to deal with, etc. So there was another ISO standard that was created on top of just the straight PDF specification, and that's PDFX. And many of you, if you've been in the industry a long time, have heard of PDFX4 or PDFX 1A and PDFX 4, and there's some new PDF that's in the works, a PDFX X6, which they'll talk about when they get into probably into the PDF2 discussion. But one of the things that even PDFX does is it just narrows down and says, yes, you have to have fonts. Oh, no, you can't have a movie. But it doesn't specify what the requirements are for example, an advertisement. Because you know what? The specifications for an ad going into a magazine or a commercial print piece, a booklet, is going to be different than it is going to be in an offset newspaper. They're going to be different types of requirements. So what the Ghent Workgroup has done, and this is really where we started back in 2002, we actually said, okay, well, how can we create a subset of PDFX that will actually allow designers or ad agencies to be able to supply a reliable file for a specific type of application, whether it's an ad or a magazine or a newspaper, and not have to worry that every newspaper has its own set of specifications, or every magazine does, and that means that the person who is trying to put this ad together needs to know what it's going to be, how it's going to be used, etc., going down the line, because that just creates more confusion for them, and they'll just wind up picking anything in the pull-down menu, and ultimately then it winds up having to be dealt with at either at the pre-press or at the press stage, which is usually a little too late to deal with those kinds of issues. And then there are people who actually take the work that's in the Ghent Workgroup specifications, which, by the way, are available. The Ghent Workgroup specs are available in most of the, as a matter of fact, in just about all of the pre-flight tools, whether it be the InFocus tools like Pitstop or Callus PDF Toolbox. Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat has a pre-flight tools. Those pre-flight tools, if you look, you'll see the Ghent Workgroup tools are in there. The Ghent Workgroup specifications are in there. And then sometimes there are unique requirements that very specific that companies need, and they'll take the Ghent Workgroup specifications and they'll actually tweak them, if you will. And why would they do that? Basically for higher reliability. Again, when you're creating files, you're creating them to be able to be processed, and to be able to be processed and deliver on a set of expectations. So if we look at the PDF Plus specifications, we have newsprint, web offset print, sheet fed offset, silk screen, large format, office documents, packaging. There are specifications that are for each of these categories, and we're constantly looking at increasing this as we find additional needs. As I said, the specifications are available in a lot of the Preflight software that's out there. And you can see if you run a Preflight software tool, you can see that there are errors, and they're very visible. It says, okay, yeah, so there's a problem. Your resolution is less than 150 ppi in this case, or you have a line. There's a warning. It says your line width is about 1/4 of a point, which could be a problem for certain types of, especially if it's a knockout of some colors, or certain types of applications, you know, a newspaper, for example. As I said, we have application settings that actually allow you to download these settings and import them into your applications, or they'll give you screenshots that say this is the way you should be setting up these PDF application settings in your application to get a good PDFX file. And then, as I said, as we were going through, it's interesting because as we were going through all these specifications, the next thing we said is, well, wait a second. Okay, so we're giving people specifications, but what if we don't know how their tools are set? We don't know how their RIP is set up. We don't know how their DFE is set up. And then we've got this picture, and so which one is the correct one? Well, you know, everybody would say, well, it's the right-hand picture. Of course, it's the correct one. But actually, that's not correct. In this case, this specific image was modified so that the left picture was actually the good picture and the right picture was the bad one. But if you got it through and you processed it, you would look at it and you'd say, well, the right one must be what we want. And of course, then when you gave it to your customer, they'd say, well, they would not be happy. Let's just put it that way. So what we did is we said, well, we need to create a test suite that would actually allow users to test their workflows. So we created something called the Ghent PDF Output Suite, and we actually we're up to version 5 now, and it's a very easy. I'll show you what it looks like. It's a very easy way to test your output device or your entire production workflow, because you can actually take these files, these test files, bring them into InDesign or Quark or Photoshop or any of the many other applications. They could be imposition applications, for example, or just run straight through your RIP. And you can make sure that, first of all, your application, your workflow will fully support critical features like transparency, overprint, ICC, different ICC supports for output intents, etc. You can do it in such a way where, as I said, it can go through from the beginning of your workflow right to the end of the workflow, or just realize that maybe it's just a setting that you need to fix. And there's a lot of, as if you download these test suites, you'll see we tried to make it simple for people. It's a very standard, simple layout. I'm not going to go through this. You're going to be able to download this, so it's going to be pretty straightforward and easy. And basically, if you see an X, that means it's wrong. And it's really not that hard. We tried to make it very, very user intuitive. We actually have each of you can see that there's I showed you, this is one of 6 pages, and each of these pages are made up of individual test files. So you could run either the individual test files, or you could run these full pages, and there's now 6 pages full. These will help you make sure that your workflow process is good, that your RIP is set with the proper requirement, with the proper settings, because we have learned over the years that even some of the newer RIPs can be set wrong. The settings can be set wrong and give you erroneous output. But as we created this test suite, we then said, okay, well, wait a second. We've got this suite, and now we've got people who are coming to us and saying, hey, you know, we have problems because some of the PDF viewers that we're looking at these PDF files are not even able to properly distinguish and differentiate when there's errors and different types of functions and features within the standard PDF and PDFX. And if you look, and here's a perfect example. So here's the on the left side. This is one page of the Acrobat of the Ghent PDF Output Suite 5 using Acrobat X, and one just using the Apple Viewer, and you can see how many X's there are in the Apple Viewer. So if you're using just the Apple Viewer, like Preview, to look at a file, you're not seeing it as it actually will process through a RIP. That could be a problem. So we said, well, wait a second. If that's the case, we should probably test a lot of these things. And we did. And we looked at what applications accurately support PDF. And you can see green, by the way, is good, red is bad. So you can see what percentage of the various applications are not so good at representing accurately a PDF file. We then said, well, wait a second, we've got these tests. How about mobile devices? And we actually created a white paper, but it's also available on the website, that looked at what is the best way to create a file that will be used both for print and on mobile devices, or just on mobile devices themselves. And you'll be able to get this, I'll tell you where to download all this stuff at the end, but it's pretty straightforward. If you just go to gwg.org, you can see all of the available information that we've posted here. And if you, so we said, okay, well, if we're looking, and this is taken from that, from the test results that we got from running the experiments that are in that white paper, and you can see that different on the left-hand side, different GWG. Those are our test patches from the output suite we talked about. Those are the numbers on the left in patch number. The description explains what that patch was, and then we looked at each of, in this case, 5 different applications: Adobe DPS, Twixy Media, Aquafatus, Quark App Studio, HTML and Quark App Studio PDF, to look at what did produce accurate results and what didn't. Another area that we started working on, and this has been probably our most challenging or our longest to date, is packaging. You know, it's interesting, for those of you who have are kind of graybeards like me and have been involved in electronic or digital publishing and graphic arts since the early days. You notice the evolution, and we used to have lots of pre-press houses that would actually get the work before it went to a printer, and most of those pre-press houses went away, except in packaging. And they went away for a lot of reasons. They went away because the tools got better, the divisions of responsibility, since the tools got better, went somewhat to the designer and somewhat to the printer, but that middleman and that guy in the middle, the PDF, the packaging prepress house, other than making flexo plates, etc., which are also starting to become digital, became less important. In packaging, they're still very important. In 2003, we took a look at that and got together with a group of people, initially in Munich, and said, look, what can we do? What are the issues that are preventing PDF being used in packaging? And ideally, what we want to do is kind of the same thing we're doing with normal commercial print. We want one version of the truth. We want one PDF that can be reviewed by marketing people, legal, and that ultimately can then be used for processing, because if otherwise we have all these PDF files in various versions traveling around, it takes a lot of time. It makes it more difficult to get packaging to market, which is really a very important thing for packagers. And basically, so our goal was to get a PDF file that will support the process from design to prepress to converter, one PDF. And we started leading this charge back in 2003. We started working with major brand owners in Europe and in the US, and leading packaging and prepress converters. And we created initially a way to begin, because we found as we started going through this that there were things that were a little bit out of our control that we were going to need to fix, but we wanted to at least give people something to begin to work with. So we created what we call the PDF for packaging specifications, similar to what we did with the newspapers and the magazines and the others. First version was in 2004. The last one was done in 2015. And at the same time, we started working with the PDF committees, the ISO committees, PDFX ISO committees, and said, okay, what can we do to address the issues beyond what we've been able to do with just creating some kind of structure in terms of specifications. So these are kind of the open issues, or the issues that are actually almost resolved, but still somewhat in limbo. We created we looked at, well, how do we pass information? Remember, we talked about job tickets before. I said that we actually use job tickets. How do we create information that goes beyond just the content of the PDF file? You know, we look at a PDF file and we see that, well, there's text and there's images, but how do we put other information in? How do we say, well, you know what, but this is really where a perf needs to go, or this is where the die cut needs to go. And by the way, what is a die cut if I'm sending it to somebody in another country? Do they call it a die cut? Do they call it a die outline? Do they call it a perf? What is the structure? What is the language, the lingua franca that we can use to be able to make some of that happen? And what can we? So we decided that metadata was going to be our friend. And CXF is actually something that was originally developed by Pantone, actually by X-Rite, but now part of Pantone. And it's a way to communicate color information. We said, okay, so we know we need to communicate, especially in packaging, because packaging doesn't just use necessarily CMYK or Pantone colors. They have brand colors that are spectral in nature. So we need to communicate spectral information. So we started working with X-Rite and then ISO to promote a better structure around CXF, and that's actually starting to fall into place nicely. PDF 2.0, again, we're working with the PDF ISO committees, the ISO 32000. This is going, PDF 2.0, and as I said, there will be a webinar on this, is the first new version since 2008. This is a big deal, and it will support CXF. So basically, you'll be able to not just get CMYK and special colors, you'll be able to get solid ink mixing, other things within the PDF information through a CXF file inside that container I talked about before, the PDF container. So that's going to be a big part of it. And then the ICC has been working on ICC Max, which actually is a way to go beyond CMYK and images and deal with appearance issues, including texture and gloss, using some CXF data support, etc. These three things and the new PDFX, which will be PDFX 6, will begin to really start to wrap up a lot of the open issues that we found when we started looking at packaging for prepress. And as I said, we have a specific packaging for prepress packaging webinar coming up. I believe it's in January. So if you want more information on that, come on in. Associating content and processing steps. So as I said before, we were looking at how do we use metadata to communicate processing steps that go beyond just the content in the PDF file. So we actually, the Ghent Workgroup, created something called using PDF to associate processing steps and content data. We passed this has been published. It was published in 2015. It's available on our website. It is now also going. We passed it to ISO to have it become an ISO standard because we felt it was that important. and we're actually working on kind of the next steps in this. Even now, that will be the next release of using metadata to help promote and automate processes. This is available, in any case, this is available on our website. What does processing steps mean? Well, here, remember we talked about layers before, and we talked about how do we structure and standardize. So if you look on the left-hand side, so that is actually what we're calling the layers, but are also called optional content in the case of a PDF file. That's the technical term for what most people call layers. And you can see that there's different types of structured and defined optional content that then allow and constrain the kind of information that can be put in there, but it's standardized, so it can be absorbed and ingested into various automated applications. A number of vendors have already started to implement some of this in their software, in their packaging software, and we'll talk more about that, as I said, in the packaging webinar. But you can see if we take this to the next step, well, we could, for example, have roles. It doesn't just have to be processing steps, it could be roles. So that if I'm a marketing person, I can open up a document and I'll see this same file differently than if I were the converter, or if I were the legal attorney who had to look at the copy, etc. So there's a lot that we can do within that PDF container that we talked about to help standardize and automate production processes. So one of the things I didn't tell you, and I'm going to tell you now, is everything that the Ghent Workgroup does is available for free. A number of you are asking for links to the presentation. I believe that the presentation will be available on our website. If you've registered for this, you'll be getting something after the fact that'll tell you where you can find it. But if you just go to gwg.org, all of our information is available there. That information includes technical documents for developers. So, for example, if you're developing a Preflight software or software that should adhere to the Ghent Workgroup specifications, we have technical documents there that are available. This is not for the faint of heart. This one is for developers. But we also have non-technical white papers, kind of for the rest of us. And for example, we came out this year, and it says GWG 2015, and it doesn't mean it's old. It just means it's the last time we updated it, and we didn't update it because, as you saw, PDF hasn't been updated since 2008. We'll be coming out with a new version in the near future, but this is very relevant even today. So what, in that document, in that white paper, and actually it's a multi-page, not just a simple white paper, what's the best way to produce application in PDF files? And it talks about the different types of image constructs, and it talks about color and applications, individual applications, and how to create PDF files outside of those applications. What if you want to develop a media neutral workflow? What if you want to develop a workflow that will allow you to go to both print and to a mobile device or to a web? How do you do that? We actually get involved in that also. It allows you to look at multi-channel or omni-channel kinds of publishing. What about variable data? Is there are you using variable data? What about PDF VT? PDF VT is now really starting to take off, and we're actually looking at some specifications around PDF VT that go beyond just the standard itself. But first thing you need to do is understand what it is. We actually have a white paper on PDF VT that talks about what it is and how you can use it, and that's available also for free on the website. A lot of people don't, there's this stuff that goes bump in the night, and if you're a printer or a pre-press house, and you see some very strange things every day. And sometimes you see things you just can't figure out what happened, and you don't know why it happened. But your job, of course, is just fix it and move on, because this is not, otherwise you wind up going down the rabbit hole, and you never know what you find down the rabbit hole. One of the things we found as we were doing our testing is that PDF file aggregation could be a problem. In other words, if you take a PDF file and you put it inside another PDF file, well, things can happen. Things that are related to fonts, things that are related to transparencies, all sorts of different things. And we actually created a white paper to help you prevent or better handle, if you need to put a PDF inside a PDF, what to do with it. And this affects a lot of people, whether you're in putting them into individual documents like ads into a publication, or even going into impositions. As I said, job tickets have a tendency to tie things together, and we at the Ghent Workgroup have working on different types of ad tickets or job tickets to tie things together. And as I said, a job ticket really describes the metadata. What's the information that needs to accompany a file to clarify the intent of what's inside there. You pass somebody a file, you throw it over the wall, and increasingly we do that more and more. Well, that's great. Person receives it and says, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Job tickets help tie a lot of that together, and what we've done is we've been trying to create standardized ways and standardized job tickets for different types of applications, so that people don't have to guess what it is. They'll actually have the information they need. We had the Ghent Workgroup ad ticket, which we actually put together in conjunction with ID Alliance. We created the Ghent Workgroup soft proofing ticket, and there are other job tickets that we have in mind that we want to deal with, and that we want to create, and whether it's for commercial print or for packaging, different types of things. There are many applications we believe that job tickets will make automation of processes a lot easier going forward. Now comes the hard part. So if we're going to do all this work and continue to do this work, we need people to continue, and we have a great group of people who actually come to our meetings and work both at the meetings and work in between, kind of it's give back, if you will. I've been in the industry for a long time, and I find that the industry's been good to me, and as a result, I want to give back to the industry. But more importantly, I also want to learn. And when I go and sit in a meeting with a lot of these people, and these are some of the greatest minds in the industry, and I'm not exaggerating. This is the real deal. It's amazing how much you can learn and how much you can share of information. So I think the participation is kind of a two-way street. You can join the Ghent Workgroup. You can even start just by attending a meeting as an observer. Our next meetings, the next 3 meetings we have one in February in Amsterdam. It's hosted by one of our association members, CMBO. We have another one in Kiel, Germany, near Strasbourg. That's been hosted by another member, Darlene. That's in June. And then we'll be having, for those of you in the States. And by the way, I travel back and forth around the globe, and a lot of our members do for meetings. So it's we try to make them in easily accessed places. As you can see, they last for about 3 days. The meetings last for 3 days. The next one will be in October in Washington. You can apply for observer status, and you can actually attend 2 of the meetings for free. Obviously, you have to pay to get there and stay, but you can attend the meetings for free. You can join a subcommittee. You don't even have to be a member to join a subcommittee. And you can become a member, and we have different membership categories for universities or educational institutions, for vendors of a number of different sizes, for what we call industry people, which would be printers, pre-press houses, consumer product companies, etc. But ultimately, it's really about becoming part of the solution, and that's really what I wanted this first webinar, to impart. We believe that you can all be part of the solution and work from inside the industry, share, and help create the future. Help to create the future. Obviously, by participating, you get the benefit of learning up front. If you're a developer, a developer of hardware, software, you get to be part of the group that actually creates the structure moving forward. But if you're a user, you get the workarounds, little things that are as I said, that the aggregation. People they were scratching their heads. We went through that, and all of a sudden it was like the light bulbs went on, and people were aha, the proverbial aha moment. So you help create solutions for the market. How do you stay informed? How do you get the information? So GWG.org. Just remember that, GWG.org. And if you go to GWG.org, that's our website. There's a lot on it. It could be a little confusing. We're working on it. As I said, it's a volunteer organization, but we're working hard. But we're working on it to try and make it a little easier to get to find things. But it's all there. And sometimes it's actually good to look around. Can't hurt. We are on social media. We have the Ghent Workgroup on Facebook, Ghent Workgroup on Twitter, and in LinkedIn, we have a company site, the Ghent-Workgroup, and you can get a lot of information there as well. So those are also great places and ways to get information. These are the future webinars that are coming up. The next one is later this week, and it's the 9 Reasons to Preflight. This is actually a very good, this will be a great webinar. This is given by one of our Belgian friends, a guy named Didier from VIGC. And we have tools that will help you understand the reason to Preflight, but more importantly, he'll go over a lot of that with you. And as I said, 21st of November, PDF 2.0. For what it's worth, these things are starting to fill up, so if you haven't registered yet, please register as soon as you can, because I think we actually have a maximum. We can only handle about 100 people at each one, and we're beginning to reach those numbers. I'm looking at the questions. Do we get a link to the presentation? As I said, if you registered, yes, you will. Someone said thanks, and I appreciate that, and you're very welcome. Are there any other questions that potentially I could answer? And if not, I want to thank you all for attending, and wish you well, and welcome you to register and attend our future presentations. So thank you very much for coming.